First of all, do we have any apologies? That's it. And Councillor Rees is standing in for, aren't you? Yeah. Okay. Thank you. Okay. Item 2 then, declarations of interest. Does anyone have any declarations of interest they need to make? No. Okay. Thank you. Okay. Item 3 then, the minutes of the previous meeting. Does anyone have any comments to make in relation to the minutes of the previous meeting? No. Okay, thank you. Item 4 then, the internal audit update for Q3, and Claire's going to give us a run through on that. Thanks, Claire.
Thank you, Chair. So this is the third quarter report of the work of the internal audit team. So it covers the period the 1st of October to the end of December. Over on page 8, you can see that we issued one audit opinion during the quarter, and that was on the disabled facilities grants for the previous year. And we gave that a neutral opinion. And as you can see from the table 2 further down, that identified a number of weaknesses, making it difficult to place reliance on the operation of the internal control framework. So we did make 4 medium risk recommendations as part of that audit, and the key areas that required improvement were in respect of management and administration of information and supporting records and documentation. So over the page on page 9, you can see the audits that we've got in progress. So a number of audits in progress there, from preparation where we're preparing the to undertake the audit, to the field work and reports in draft that will come through to the next meeting. We also, as you know, continue to monitor recommendations once we've issued a piece of work. So that is an improved position from Q2, pleased to report. Paragraph 2.7, you can see. So by the end of December, we had 329 recommendations that have been made, and 287 of those have been implemented. So we're at 87%, and the target for the year end is 96. So there are 42 recommendations still to be implemented. 16 of those are in progress, and 19 of those have not yet reached their due date. And there is further details on that at Appendix A. I'm happy to take any questions. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you.
Just some clarification, really. I was looking at the disabled facilities grant, which presumably has been, obviously, is filtered through the county council. Has this been tendered out to a private company, and are we getting it back? Or has it not been tendered out ever to a private company? Because this figure covers the time when presumably the private company was managing, if not providing, obviously, this grant, because it's a matter of concern that we're down to marginal, which is technically a neutral term, but clearly suggests that there is room for improvement, and it's difficult to, as my colleague said, difficult to trust, for want of a better word, to place reliance on it. And this is a very important grant, and it's obviously a grant which fits in with the requirements of this authority to meet its obligations with regard to managing the disability grant. Could I have some idea of the history of this grant and when we're getting it back into our own area?
So in respect to the disabled facilities grant, yes, you're correct, as in there is an external company managing that work at the moment. During that period of while that company's actually been looking after that particular work, there's COVID's obviously arisen since then, but there are a number of issues, I think, that have been obviously highlighted in the audit, in the internal audit report, and that I think we've generally throughout the contract have probably wanted to be better. So the management of the information, the timeliness of the information, where we've asked for sort of records to be sent back in order for us to do our reconciliation for the grants and things like that. So we have identified and we have asked various different questions throughout the contract for that, which is partly the reason why we are bringing that work back in-house, so we've got better control over that.
Thank you very much.
Thank you to the Section 1 officer. Claire, can you expand though? So there's 4 headline recommendations. Can you just give us bullet points for what those 4 recommendations are? Oh, Chris. There you go.
Is that better? Can you hear me? Yeah, I haven't got that information to hand in front of me at the minute, but I can circulate something that provides a bit more detail if that's helpful on what the 4 recommendations are. But as Sarah said, it was to do with getting information back on a more timely basis and that kind of thing. But yeah, I'll provide some further detail and circulate if that's helpful.
Thank you. We scroll down to the Appendix A, I believe it is, the summary on page 11. There are, let me just look, the numbers, 42 number of recommendations not completed. Obviously, the vast majority of those are in the Chief Executive Department. There's one, though, that's of a high risk. I mean, what high something. Can we get a little bit more information on what that is?
For the meeting, I forgot. I'm pretty sure, I think we've mentioned it at previous meetings, it relates to a post in relation to the GDPR audit, but I will just need to double check and confirm that that is the one that's outstanding. So yeah, apologies. I meant to check that before coming into the meeting, but yeah, I will confirm that one.
I mean, genuinely, that's no problem. But if it is that one, Chair, is there some sort of way that this has appeared on our 2 quarters now and nothing's been done about it? And because it's a high, I don't want to say risk if it's not a risk, but it's flagged high. Really, something needs to be said, pushed back to perhaps the cabinet to say this isn't acceptable, or even yourself, Stephen. I don't know where. Maybe yourself or the leader of the council, that this has been on our reports now twice. If it is that one particular role, the GDP role.
Yeah, sorry, just Sarah's just pulled it up. It is the one in relation to the Chief Information Officer. The council does not have a formally appointed person providing the role of Chief Information Officer. It was picked up as part of the IT governance audit. Well,
then my point stands quite clear. That can I feed that back, please, through the deputy leader? So,
Through you, Chair. I mean, there's 3 overlapping roles, of course. There's a data protection officer, which has certain roles and we have in place. There's a senior information risk owner, which is me, and you have in place. I think this one is the 3rd strand, and it usually sits with the head of ICT, which is where it has sat when we're going through an interim position with the head of ICT, but that ought to be resolved very swiftly with a new appointment, I think, in the near future. So it has been on there, but it hasn't been, left adrift unattended, if you like, and hopefully it'll come off with that resolution on a permanent basis.
Just to summarise, it was while you've been in the process of recruiting somebody for the ICT role, then.
That's my understanding. Yeah, well, we've been deciding where that lies, and that's been decided now, and the recruitment process is fairly advanced, I think. Oh, they start this month. There we go.
Okay. All right. So that should be resolved then imminently.
Yes. Yeah, you should hopefully see that. Well, you won't see that on the next one.
Okay, thanks.
It just shows how the system works, that you can pick up that one and it is highlighted and it is solvable and identifiable, which shows it's a really good process.
Thank you, Chair. I'll just jump straight to the operative bits, if you like, because you'll all be familiar with, the background to how risk reporting is done, and we're going to do some more training for that for you soon. So the operative bits here are 2.1 to 2.3, and to Councillor Wilden's point, 2.1 is another example of how these systems work, because whilst there are 9 overdue risks at the time of publication, between publication and this finding its way to you, all 9 of those overdue risks have been reviewed. So hopefully you can take some assurance from that. The issues as to why they were outstanding, which some narrative is given on that paragraph, has been addressed. They've all been found appropriate homes and they've all been reviewed. I can give you a little bit more detail on that if you like. Effectively, 2 have been amalgamated because there was a degree of repetition. So it went down to 7 overdue risks, and then the overdue risks were reassigned and reviewed, and we're all back on track with those. So 2.2 tells us that we've had an increase in one in relation to avian flu. And then in the usual fashion, we report the corporate risk profile in full in the appendix. So I'd be happy to try and take any questions that any members might have on that, but that's all I propose to say on this report, Chair.
Yes, 4 of those are relating to the licensed enforcement. Were those the ones?
Appear in Appendix A to this report. Yeah.
And we'll see a review.
Well, they'll just drop off, because the only reason they came to this committee was to alert you to the fact that their risks were, the reviews were overdue. They don't ordinarily come to this committee in terms of not ranking as corporate risks, they're service level risks, but they came here so you were cited on the fact that we were overdue on some of our reviews. So unless they fall overdue again, or they're elevated to a corporate risk because, you know, the gravity or whatever, you probably won't see those at this committee again.
Okay, thanks.
And with a bit of luck, you won't see any other overdue risks at this committee again, but who knows? I might be promising too much this evening.
Okay, do we have any other questions in relation to that? Councillor Brockie.
Just a comment about the fact that 2 of these, which may have been subsumed into each other by now, you know, that isn't quite clear. The Environmental Protection Service, and the fact it also sort of, it's repeated down here, but it is particularly important in view of the fact that we've got to comply with other bodies. You know, there is a commitment throughout Staffordshire to, you know, the North Staff's Air Quality commitment and so forth. And it is overdue by a considerable amount. And obviously thank you for the explanation about, you know, why this may be the case, but can we have some sort of time frame of when this will be redressed?
It's already been redressed.
It's been redressed.
Yeah.
Thank you very much.
Okay. Mike?
Sorry to keep going back to the Appendix A again, but there's obviously one report was for the LEP. I actually find that really, really interesting. The risk is that a failure to radically influence the local economic partnership to adopt NBC priorities. Can I request that now it's been completed, that we get sight of that one, because I find that very, very interesting, and I'd like to see what the result was for that.
Is it possible for that to be circulated?
Yes, absolutely, Chair. We can circulate it, and if it's helpful, we could probably use that as an example for the training that I'm going to give you on the risk register. If you want to take a look at that risk in particular,
that would be
we can highlight that one.
idea.
Yep, no problem.
Yep.
Dropping down to the heat maps themselves,
Mhm.
if we go down to financial risks, page 28. Part of the action plan is to increase reserves and balances with the description that monthly review and update to financial risk assessments, reserves and balances. Can I ask the Section 151 officer to tie together for me how a budget that we have seen twice at financial scrutiny, it's been to cabinet, and I think the final step now is for it to go to council. We're borrowing 15 million this year. The reserves are smaller in that budget than they are in the previous budget. How does our actions meet the action plans?
Yep, so the budget process is cabinet tomorrow, full council next Wednesday. You're right, as in the budget report does state that we will be requiring borrowings of 15 million. That's over a 3-year period. So we kind of do a snapshot of those 3 years just for ease of out of the 10-year capital programme. The borrowing element, we are currently doing, well, the first point of the borrowing will be internal financing. So we have money in our bank at the moment from the Town Deal Fund, the Future High Street funds, which there's timings of when that funding will go out. So our first port of call will be, and as per our treasury management advisors all in close, would always be to use money internally that you have first, because obviously it's cheaper, etc. So part of that funding will be, part of that 15 million, should I say, will be us doing internal financing first. Then when we get to the point where we do need to go externally, we have factored in those borrowing costs within the medium-term financial strategy. In relation to the reserves, we're maintaining the cost of living reserve, and we are trying to boost up our budget and borrowing support fund. So we've always had a budget support fund, but because of things we've experienced over the last sort of 12 months with obviously inflation and interest increases and the spikes, we're trying to put a little bit more in there for anything that might pop out of the woodwork, or any changes sort of nationally and globally that might sting us, and we might need to go back there. From a budget point of view, we have obviously updated our capital strategy. We know the projects that we need to spend money on. We know that we can afford those. We've built those borrowing costs into the MTFS. We're trying to be extra prudent by putting a little bit aside just in case we need any more borrowing costs, as it were. So if we had huge amounts of reserves, then certainly we would be calling on those reserves before we were looking at borrowing. But we know that affordability wise, we can afford to borrow that 50 million over the 3-year period, should I say. But we're also trying to boost up our reserves as much as we can as well. So we're doing the best of both within our funding envelope. Does that?
I think the practicalities I'd agree on, but what I don't agree on, and regardless of whether I agree with the budget or not, the two different reports clash. This heat map clashes with the budget that is obviously going to cabinet tomorrow, and then we'll go to full council. What I'm suggesting is that the wording of the heat map is changed so that these two key documents, as I see them, don't clash with each other. I'm not asking for change because actually I think the risk rating of a high red 9 is absolutely correct. But I think if we are going to say that we're going to do one thing on this document and then do something completely different in another major document, that doesn't send the right message. I think this document very clearly says that we are trying to build reserves up, and we're not. By the end of this financial year, the reserves will be smaller than they are now, because for things like the £1 million that we put into a reserve for legal fees, a large swathe of that is going to be used as part of to balance the budget, rightly or wrongly. That's going to be that money's been set aside, and it's not suddenly going to back into a £1 million reserve. The fact that we're not going to get the money back from the company straight away means that we are going to have to wait for that for a number of years. So what I'm saying is I don't want to labour the point. I just think these two reports clash with each other, and I think the wording on the heat map should be changed.
There is one aspect to this. I mean, reserves don't necessarily correlate with what you've got in the bank. You know, they don't. There's reserves other than the financial reserves. So the fact that you actually borrow doesn't necessarily mean that you've suddenly lost a load of money. It just means that at that particular time you needed money to change your financial situation so that you could do the certain, the things that you've decided to do. So I mean, have you got any more that you want to say on that, Sarah? Okay.
I think on this particular heat map, this is one risk that we need to be aware of, at which we are aware of. We need, yeah. So we know it's a high risk. We recognise, it is a risk. We wouldn't be prudent of us to not look into this and constantly review where we are in respect of this risk. I think with the budget element, we aren't using reserves to balance our budget. So yes, we did have a Wally's Quarry reserve. We spent obviously some of that reserve in all the legal process that we went through, which was a huge piece of work. Yes, we have been awarded some costs back, which we put back into that reserve, but then having looked at where we are and the potential situation around Wally's and what's been agreed illegally, then we are keeping some money in that reserve, but we are also transferring some money from that reserve into other reserves. So we're not using that money to balance our budget. We are allocating it into other usable reserves for things that are currently going on, or that things that, you know, well, they are still currently going on. They're not going to go away overnight. So the cost of living reserve, etc. We are allocating that into a reserve for next year, so that it isn't using the Wally's Quarry reserve to balance the budget. We aren't using any reserves to balance the budget for next year.
Just in closing, Chair, I mean, I think we're dancing on pins, if I'm really honest. I don't want to labour the point, but I think I've made my point. And
Well,
okay.
Yeah, I think you are labouring the point, but that's my opinion. Yeah, the thing is, if you have a reserve, you would maintain that reserve at whatever level you feel is relevant. And if you believe that a great deal of the potential cost has gone, which we understand it has, or we believe it has, then there isn't any point in keeping the reserve at the level it's at. You only have whatever you feel is prudent. And if the officers feel that that is prudent, then I would see no problem with it. Mark.
Thank you, Chair. I don't necessarily like the tune that Councillor Stubbs is playing, but I do like the key that he's playing it in, because I think he's right to highlight the long-term risks of borrowing to the authority. We can't live beyond our means. There is a tiny part of Councillor Stubbs's soul that belongs to Margaret Thatcher in that respect, and she smiles down on us whenever Councillor Stubbs or another Labour councillor is hawkish about borrowing. But his specific point about the wording on the risk register here, my understanding from the response we had from our officer is that it doesn't hold up, because indeed some of our reserves will be rising in value as others are decanted into them, for example, the Wally's Quarry, and also the total amount of prudential borrowing that this authority will undertake isn't as large as Councillor Stubbs might have indicated, because some of what we will be borrowing is internal financing to the council. So I'm reassured about the budget this year, but going forward, is the wording on this this particular sheet the best wording for us to have? Because, you know, Councillor Stubbs and a future Stubbs containing administration may well want to revisit this. Is it right that we continue to say we increase our reserves and balances as a hedge against the future risk of not having enough money in the future? I don't want to say let's water it down, but are we confident that this is the right wording now? Oh, no, so yeah, thank you.
That's certainly one of the control measures. Yeah, absolutely. And you know, it's around well, yeah, it is predominantly that, because it's around visibility on you know, signs of safety and reporting lines and all those sorts of things. So it's predominantly that. There is a piece of work still to do on that. But maybe this is another one we can take a more in-depth look at, if you like, when we do the session, because I don't have the wealth of info that sits behind me here in terms of what the action plans are and the mitigation measures.
Do you know if there's a compliance target?
Again, without having the Grace system opening and seeing what's in there, I wouldn't be able to tell you today. I'd be surprised if there wasn't, because that's absolutely what you'd expect for a, you know, some sort of key performance indicator along with that completion of training. But I'm more than happy to workshop this one at our next session, along with any others you want to take a closer look at on the day.
Okay, thanks for that.
Yeah, thank you. Just a bit further on that. How many of us are obliged to, who want to get qualified on safeguarding? Is it just council officers or councillors as well? The reason I ask that, because I've just completed 2 levels of a safeguarding course over the past 5 days, and just wondered if it's at all relevant.
Safeguarding training is compulsory for the councils. So yeah, everybody's undertaking safeguarding training here.
Yeah, it's everybody's responsibility, Chair, safeguarding.
Yeah.
Can't print it.
Okay, thanks. Have we got any more questions or comments on this report then? No? Okay, thanks, Dan. Item 6 then, the independent auditor's report and audit findings can be found on page 37, and Andrew Smith from our auditors is here to give us a rundown on that. Thank you, Andrew.
Thank you, Chair. Members may recall that this was presented to the last meeting, but you may remember that there were a couple of outstanding queries at the point of the meeting. They related to some queries we had around the valuation of the council's plant, property and equipment. And there was also a query with the actuary on the pension fund of the pension liability as well. We did obviously resolve those queries after the meeting, and we ultimately signed off the opinion on the 30th of November. At the end of the month, pleased to say that there weren't any issues arising from those final set of queries. So there were no additional errors that needed to be adjusted in the accounts, and the audit findings report is back here just for completeness, just so members are aware that there weren't any further issues that they needed to be aware of. So I'm not going to present all the detail again. I'll spare you that, but more than happy to take any questions that any members may have.
Is anybody? We've had a good go at this before, but
I was going to say that, Chair, actually. I mean, we had a really good look at it last time. So just very much looking at the action plan. So the journal and authorization and journal user access rights, is that, as a account myself, that hopefully is quite an easy, straightforward. I mean, I know it's down as a sort of high issue, high level risk, but is that a relatively straightforward thing to fix?
Yes, in theory. The first one is just a periodic review of who has access to the ledger and who can post a journal. So that's probably something that I would recommend is done at least once a year, ideally more regularly, but at least once a year. So hopefully that wouldn't be a particularly big job. The second one is probably more onerous. So I'll probably let Sarah comment in terms of that one, because that will obviously review. It is best practice for journals to be authorised by someone separate to the posting. It's a check and balance in the system, but clearly there is far more management time involved in doing that. So I'll let Sarah respond on that second one.
Yeah, just on that point, I think there was 2 or 3 journals, and we had our general ledger is via Civica, and we had an upgrade. And there was a small window where there was a glitch in the upgrade. So there was 2 or 3 journals that the actual administration person actually putting the journal on could approve it as well, which obviously, you know, we don't endorse that. There needs to be a separation of duties. So they were small amounts. I think there were a few £100 and one was £1,000. So identified that straight away, went back to Civica. Civica said, oh, right, okay, well, we found the glitch, they fixed it. You know, pretty much the same day, I think, or the day after. So that has been corrected, and that is something that they are now aware of when they do upgrades, and something that they look at as part of their upgrade system now.
Got to find that it's a system problem rather than an officer problem. Now, Sarah and I shared a very, very feisty head of finance at another authority not too far away from here once. And that was one of her big bugbears, was about authorizations on journals. So I'm glad it's not an officer failing, and that it's more a systems failing.
tell us how well they've done on this. By the way, Claire.
Thank you, Chair. So the public sector internal audit standards set a requirement for every internal audit service to have a review at least once every 5 years. So the first review had to take place before the 31st of March 2018, which was the first assessment of this kind that had been done. So for Newcastle, at that time, when you had an internal audit team, that review was undertaken in April 2017, and the results were reported through to the Audit and Standards Committee at the time. For Stoke, our last review was done in February 2018. So obviously this is the 5-year mark for us to have our review undertaken for a second time. So we did an evaluation of reviews that had been at other Staffordshire local authorities and selected Business Solutions Limited to undertake our review based on quality and cost considerations. So the review was actually undertaken in November, just before Christmas. And included interviews with me and my team. They also looked at a sample of reports, as well as looking at our policies and procedures, looking at Audit and Standard Committee reports, and they also sampled some clients as well, and they also did a questionnaire for the chair as well. So thank you for completing that. So that resulted in the report that you see at the appendix. So on page 5, there's 3 levels of opinions that we could achieve. The highest standard is generally conforms, which doesn't sound that impressive, does it? But we were able to achieve that highest standard of generally conforms. There's 3 levels: generally conforms, partially conforms, and does not conform. So we did achieve the highest level. Sorry, it's page 5 of the actual report, which is a different page in your pack, isn't it? Sorry. So page 5 of the report will be page 47, thank you. So the second part of the report identifies the recommendations that are a result of the review. So 11 recommendations were made. So 6 of those were review points to better reflect application of the standards, and 5 were recommendations for consideration only. So there were no recommendations that we needed to undertake to make sure we were demonstrating alignment with the standards. So that's positive. The report also made 4 suggestions for enhancement to the service, and in section 3 of the report there's benchmarking details showing how the service compares with other local authorities and with the private sector. Sorry, I'll just tell you what page that is, which is on page 97. And you've also got the results of the stakeholder feedback on page 99. So I'm happy to take any questions. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Does anybody have any questions on this report?
Well, firstly, just congratulations. It's a good report, which, you know, to be honest, I didn't expect anything else, if the truth be told, but it is always good to see that our homework's been marked correctly. Just relating to the benchmarking, the charter, I think it is, it's the first standard. I think I've gone too far there. It's the standard 1000. Let me just find it.
Yeah, it's on page 101.
Yeah, sorry, I've gone past it on my. We seem to be just slightly behind the local authority standard. Is that anything in particular, or is it too close that it's anything tangible? It's just that we're a squeak behind local authority standards.
As far as I'm aware, no feedback was given on anything we need to add to the chart, and say the observations were that the charter was good, comprehensive, included everything it needs to. So yeah, sorry, I can't answer anything further on that one. Let's say obviously something slight in there, isn't there?
Yeah, I mean, if you actually look at the bar chart, the differences in the vast majority of cases are minute, really. You know. Do we have any other questions on this? No? Yeah. Well done, Claire. You know, obviously a very satisfying report. So just It's very good, really. Yeah, I mean, it's obviously, as Mark says, it's very pleasing that we've got something like this, and we wouldn't expect anything different, but nevertheless, it can happen. And on this occasion, it hasn't. So that's excellent. Thank you. Moving on then, the committee work plan, page 105. There's a couple of things to note. The meeting for the 17th of April, the annual internal audit report and annual opinion will move from that meeting into the meeting in June, because it's probably too early for us to get it finished. And just for completeness, the Treasury Management Annual Report shown on the 27th of June is actually 22-23, not 21-22. And as Dan's already alluded to, we're arranging a training session for the hour before the next meeting. And we've been trying to see how we could look in more detail for some time at the different risk factors. So what Dan's going to do is effectively give us a worked example on a screen so that we can actually get to the root of the thing. Because I think that we've probably been running around in circles a little bit, and I know I've mentioned it before, but what we actually need to do is understand the process, I think. And I think that we've been getting more information, but it doesn't necessarily correlate to us having a better understanding of it. So part of that training session will concentrate on that. And then after that, we'll have another discussion and see how we would like any sort of deeper dives, shall we say, into the different reports, in the future. Okay. Right. Well, we don't.
Can I ask for an addition?
Yeah, sure. Yeah.
And it's I'm quite relaxed when we bring it. If you want to concentrate on the training on April, I'm fine with that. On the 27th then of June, the LGA Newcastle-under-Lyme benchmarking report was published last week. Can we bring that to the committee, please? I'm not sure if all members will be aware that even exists, and it was published last week, and it's quite a good document to come to audit. It's the LGA benchmarking document. It benchmarks every single council against its peer group, etc., over a wide range of areas. And I just think it would be a really good document for us to look at.
I don't see any problem with that. Yeah.
I'm happy to supply it as well. I'll email it to members.
Yeah, as long as we can look at it before the meeting.
No, sure. I'll do it this week.
So so we've got no urgent business. So thank you everybody for coming, and good night.
Cool.